Hello everybody, thank you for taking your time to watch this video around Adobe Student Licensing for Further Education. My name is David Grant and I'm the Software Solutions Manager here at Academia. Agenda-wise today, we're just going to give you a bit of an introduction and overview of our relationship with Adobe. We'll talk about some of the driving forces which we've seen resulting in a shift from device towards user-based licensing. Really important slide around K-12 eligibility, a great way of really reducing costs for the sector. And we'll then go back into licensing, so the options you may have and how you can reduce cost under a VIP agreement. We'll then talk about promotions that are currently available and some value-added services to help support your needs before we summarise. So Academia are really proud to be and to have been Adobe's largest educational reseller for over 10 years. We boast unique partner status in the sense that we are their only platinum reseller, education elite reseller, and Adobe Sign Velocity partner. And all that really means is we have access to the best pricing and very specific resource available towards education and education type solutions. We have a fully trained sales team and myself and my team available to support when things get a bit complicated. And we offer a range of value-added services we'll touch on towards the end. So when we talk about the driving forces, it's probably worth starting here by stating the majority of the sector have historically licensed on a device basis. And this was twofold. It was simply because you would have had less devices than you would have had students, and a device license was more cost effective than a user-based license. So historically, we've always licensed in that, or the majority have licensed in that model. However, with COVID kicking in and the need to deliver applications to students who may be at home, for example, then all of a sudden we've needed to ensure we can provide these applications that were historically on premise to those that are now at home. One of the big challenges with Adobe specifically is there is no compliant manner in which you can provide access to users off-site to machines licensed on a device basis. So in the last year, many institutions may have had to procure named user licenses, and this may be in addition to existing commitments you have with Adobe, where you may have had a device estate running for the last year and would have had to duplicate and buy additional user licenses to ensure your core users can access the software. This has absolutely been the biggest driving force. However, it's really worth talking about general student access. Again, a lot of teaching and learning, a lot of information around this, and where we see success is often when it's around flexible learning and the ability to empower students to learn anywhere. Again, COVID has forced this upon us, but this was already a trend we were starting to see with institutions providing one-to-one schemes, applications provided to students directly. And the point I'm making here is it's certainly worth thinking around how you as an institution want to deliver teaching going forwards. And I think it's probably even more applicable with Adobe when we think that they're creative applications. Where are students creative? Where are they inspired, where they can complete their work? It may not be in a library, it may not be physically on premise, it may be in their garden or somewhere else out and about, for example. Next point, again, really valid. So JISC, some of you may be familiar with, offer a 3-year site license for education. And this allows you to install Adobe Creative Cloud on every single device on premise. And again, this has been a really common way for some institutions to procure their Adobe device-based licensing. The point I'm making here is that's a 3-year agreement that's just coming up for expiry. So again, just bear in mind any challenges, any changes in how you're delivering teaching and learning. And fundamentally, just think about the value you'll get on device licensing going forwards. The final point here, I'm going to touch on the next slide, but again, I mentioned right at the beginning that historically a device license was more cost effective than a named user. That is no longer the case, irrespective of who you are, but more applicably, if you qualify for K-12, you could be in to save a small fortune. So K-12 is what Adobe considers schools, if you like. So Adobe, American company, they don't recognize an FE sector as such. Adobe have 2 license models for education. You have K-12, which in effect is what we've always referred to as schools licensing in the UK, and higher education pricing. So again, there's no sort of FE price or any clarity that's FEHE or K-12 FE. And last year, we're really proud again to have worked with the SFCA in particular to really sort of lobby Adobe and really drive them to provide clarification. And our justification was very much when you look at how funding is delivered in the UK, and to treat a college in the same manner as a higher education establishment just didn't feel fair. But more applicably, when you look at the actual ranges of students in the US who are able to access schools-based licensing, it does go up to sort of our FE level, if you like. So the definition Adobe have utilised is around the international or the ISCED levels, and that calls out that level 3 and below qualify for K-12, level 4 and above are eligible for standard educational HED pricing. So examples of level 3 and below could be like an A level, for example. Levels 4 and above could be degree plus. Generally, you would know this as an FE establishment. You will probably have or may have a cohort of higher education students, and often simply because they are funded in a different way, they stick out like a sore thumb. So really important on this is for you to understand of your student body, do you have any HED students? Or if you do have HED, how many of them are there? Put this in perspective, the discount from commercial pricing to education is significant. The discount from higher education pricing, which you may be paying today, you could save up to 98% if you qualify and are eligible for K-12 pricing. It is huge. So again, make sure you're aware of where your students are, what buckets they fall into, and that will really help you reduce your cost. And again, what we've seen with many is it's not just a case of reducing cost, it's also gaining flexibility. We've had customers that have been spending X figure on device licensing for years, have realized they are a K-12 eligible member and have been able to slash that cost in half whilst being able to provide every single staff and student with access to the software on premise and at home. So for a few of you, this may be your scenario. It's the holy grail. We're going to help you reduce your costs significantly, and we're going to help provide you additional flexibility to your students as well. Just a little bit more on the difference between K-12 and HED. So pricing is absolutely the biggest differential. A couple of the points, so single applications are not available for K-12. They are under HED, although a single app on the HED is probably the same as 10 to 20 full Creative Clouds under K-12. Due to the low unit cost, there are minimum order quantities for K-12, which has 500 for users. They have just reduced that to 300, which is aimed at small schools, and potentially some FE will benefit from this if you have 300 or less students. And there is a minimum order quantity of 25 devices as well. For higher education, there are no restrictions as standard. You could buy one license, one single app. The only minimum order quantity relates to that student license pack, which is a minimum order of 100. And there is tiered pricing on higher education, levels 1 to 4, and there is not for K-12. So just to talk a bit more around user versus device. So if this wasn't clear from earlier on, hopefully this slide will really clarify the difference between the two. In effect, you're getting Creative Cloud, very similar in terms of services and what access you have. But when we go through this, it becomes quite apparent and really reiterates the benefits of a user license. So first and foremost, a user license can be installed on a personal device for home use. A shared device or device license cannot be. You can also provide remote access with a user license, which you can't with a shared device license. And just to pause on that point, some of you may be thinking, well, if I've licensed a user, do I now need to procure a device license so that if I want to provide remote access, I can do so? And no, you do not. So just by licensing a single user, you're entitled to install the software onto every single machine on premise to provide remote access to that user. And also, and as to the last point here, that user can come to site and access the software on any on-premise machine. So a user license is in effect the ultimate flexibility. I can use it at home, I can use it on premise, and the college can choose to virtualize or stream an application to me as well. A couple of the points just worth calling out. So one is probably more around just thinking about next year around device licensing again. We saw when COVID kicked in, institutions were forced to socially distance labs when there was some return of students. And I appreciate many of you may have overcome this now, but it's probably dependent on your space. So if you've not managed to distribute your machines in a manner where they're all socially distanced, what we found is in many labs, it's not a case of just using or losing half of those machines. It's often a case of the one to my left, to my right, in front of me, behind me, and may mean I've only got access to 25% or maybe a third of that device estate. A really valid point, again, when you're looking at device licensing, how many devices can I actually use? And the final point here is really important. So whilst we talk about user versus device, absolutely, if you qualify for K-12, you can license all your users and save money. It's a no-brainer. However, for many, particularly if you're running HE or you have a really large student population, and maybe the majority don't utilize Adobe as part of their core subjects, you may want a hybrid model to reduce that cost. And that may be a case of licensing every core user. So if a student studying media, photography, or any course that requires Adobe software, they will be licensed as a user, and you may choose to take a handful of device licenses for open access areas, libraries, media labs, should a hobbyist or a casual user who doesn't need Adobe as part of their course, but maybe just has an interest in it or it's supporting something else they're doing. So that hybrid model may well be best for many as well. So a lot of the licensing we supply is VIP, and I'll give you a bit more detail in terms of VIP versus the other common licensing model, ETLA, in a moment. But before I do, I want to reiterate, identify your eligibility. It is by far the best way of reducing your cost, and I will continue to repeat that with no shame throughout the rest of this presentation. So back onto what a VIP is. A VIP agreement is an annual prorated agreement which you could procure Adobe products through. So you can get named or device. It's by far the most commonly used agreement. It has the most flexibility, but has historically not had the unit cost available under ETLA agreements. Again, when we factor in the K-12 eligibility, it is significantly cheaper even than ETLA pricing. So again, we'll go back to it, identify your eligibility. ETLA is probably best known when you think of JISC or the old EduServe site license, which is that on-premise agreement. And again, as a headline comparison, an ETLA is a 3-year agreement, tend to give you the lowest unit cost, but very inflexible. You can't remove licenses, you can only add, and then you're committed to that for the rest of the period. And again, as many people would have seen in the last 3 years, if you've had the JISC on-premise agreement, you would have had to pay your renewal last summer for on-site device licensing, which you wouldn't have been able to access. And that inflexibility is definitely something to be wary of. VIP agreements, I mentioned a couple of slides back, are tiered levels 1 to 4. We can help you get to level 4, even if your requirement doesn't get there. So 100 licenses is what gets you onto level 4, or 100 licenses plus. Even if your requirement is less than that, we can ensure you get to level 4, benefit from that pricing at no additional cost. But this is probably a real big point, with the exception of eligibility on this slide. So a VIP prorates, and something that you may want to do is look to license on a 11th or maybe even a 10-month basis to run with your term time. So hopefully this will give you an understanding of that. So the table at the bottom breaks down the months of the year, and we're assuming we're going to start a Adobe VIP agreement on the 1st of July. And apologies, but just to make life easy for me and everyone else, I've rounded the student license price well up to 12, so that I can give you a monthly breakdown in an easier manner. So I set up my agreement 1st of July, I order a license, I'm going to pay £12. I set up my agreement on the 1st of July, but I wait till the 1st of August. My license is now going to cost me £11. If you can get all the way through to September, you're talking £10. And you may, for example, have courses that run from January to the end of the term, in which case you could procure your license then. So start your agreement at the end of your term, and then you're able to order a license as of when you need it. This is a really good thing to do, and we would encourage every single college to set up a VIP agreement. And as the tip says at the bottom, set up that VIP agreement at the end of your academic year. So this will be coming up in the next 2 to 3 months. And at that stage, let us set one up. You may never need to use it. It won't cost you a penny. But if you find yourself halfway through the next academic year and all of a sudden you need to buy X amount of licenses, you don't want to be committing for another 12-month period. You want those to run for the remainder of that term, particularly in uncertain times, allowing you to make the best decision in the following summer on what you're going to do for the next year. Okay, so in terms of promotions from Adobe, there are a few. I've kind of touched on a couple of these already, but there is a higher education pack. So if you do have higher education students, again, named user licenses are now more cost effective than a device license. And this new higher education pack has a reduced price. So it's currently on promotion as a 25% discount, which is expected to end in November. It has expired and been reintroduced a couple of times, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if that is the last we see of it in November. In addition, Adobe have helped reduce minimum order quantities. So that higher education pack we've just talked about now has a minimum order quantity of only 100. I mentioned earlier that they've reduced the minimum order quantity for K-12 user, albeit that's slightly caveated. And speaking of caveats, the next 3 points here all have a little asterisk after them in the sense that they are your status and your agreement would define what you're eligible for here. So the renewal promotion is particularly useful for VIP customers. Many of you may have benefited from this last year, not necessarily going to reduce your cost, but allows you to get a lot more licensing for very little additional price. There is also an Acrobat promotion. If you qualify for K-12, just don't even bother with this. There's no point at all, but certainly for higher education users, if you do need Acrobat licensing, Adobe are offering a promotion that allows you to reduce your cost if you swap perpetual for a subscription license. And the final point here is Adobe Sign, so completely off piece, but really applicable. We've seen huge take up in digital signature technologies from multiple vendors since COVID started, really. And Adobe in particular not only have a very, very good enterprise solution, they've absolutely ripped the price down. So it's probably a fifth of the cost of their closest competitor. And again, there's a load of promotions available. There are some caveats around them. Please speak to us on a case by case. We'll be more than happy to discuss them with you. So in terms of the value-added services from academia, I've mentioned that I highly recommend you start a VIP agreement at the end of your academic year. To do so, you have to order a single license. However, we will order that for you. We will take that hit. So we will create a new agreement for you, subject to your if you wish, but there's no cost in doing so. We also provide bespoke pool tools, which are probably more applicable for higher education. They can integrate with e-procurement tools, but these are great if you've maybe got devolved procurement. We also offer license allocation services, and again, both of these are chargeable services. Something maybe, or a use case maybe more applicable for the sector would be if you are having to buy, 1,000 student licenses, and you want to get some of your funds back. You may want to charge the students to download their license, and these portals can be really good at just clawing back some of those funds, just to, whether you're subsidizing it or you're expecting the students to fully pay, that can be of some benefit. In addition, we can help get a free license report from Adobe. This is, again, could be really good. Lots of the sector have merged in the last few years. So if you're not sure, maybe on some existing agreements, some legacy licensing you may have that's still available, speak to us. We can help you get a consumption report from Adobe. And likewise, this session today is very generic. There's a few caveats, a few asterisks here and there. So speak to us, get in touch and book a consultation. No costs associated. And allows us just to talk about your particular needs and what models we think may be best for you. So to summarize, no surprises on the first one, define the eligibility of your students. That is the one that is going to save you a small fortune potentially. Have a think about what next academic year brings and understand the demand usage you're going to need. Can we guarantee that any specific student is going to physically be on site? Do we know how many students need Adobe software? These are the types of questions we really need to get the answers to ensure you're not going to be forced in the 11th hour to spend far more than you need to license yourselves. I've said here, start a new VIP this July. Start a new VIP at the end of your academic year is probably the actual point here. Again, no cost to do so, but that will give you a load of flexibility throughout the next academic term. And again, speak to us. If you have your account manager on my details, please feel free to reach out directly. If not, drop us a line on info@academia.co.uk. Generic number there as well, but we'll be very speedy in our response to you. So yeah, fire over any questions, book your consultation, speak to us about setting up agreement, ask us about eligibility, so on and so forth. Thank you all very much for your time today. It's been my pleasure delivering this and look forward to speaking to you all on a one-to-one basis. Take care.